Welcome to the Sentimental Gardener podcast. I'm your host, Cass Dowding, and this is a gardening podcast about how we grow with plants, with places, and with each other. Today's guest is someone whose influence you've probably felt, even though you didn't always know his name. Rodger Elliot is a horticulturist, a writer, a mentor, and a lifelong champion of Australian native plants. His career began in the early 1960s, learning from pioneers like Edna Walling, Jack McLeod of Wildflower Nursery, and Glen Wilson during his early years at E.H. Hammond. From there, his work flowed through nurseries, landscapes, encyclopedias, radio waves, and thousands of gardens across the country. For 35 years, he co-authored the Encyclopaedia of Australian Plants Suitable for Cultivation, a 9-volume body of work that changed the way this country gardens with native plants. And always, Gwen was there. His wife, his collaborator, his steady partner. Their names are spoken together for a reason. Together, they've shaped not just plants, but people too. And they've been honoured accordingly, with national and international awards, and even a building bearing their name at the Cranbourne Gardens. So this is a story about plants, yes, but it's also about love, legacy, ecology, and the slow beauty of a life lived in deep relationship with the natural world. I'm so honoured to share this story with you today. So there's a lot that I would love to talk about, especially because you're still working in the industry with Australian natives. But I want to go back to the early days of your life. And I'd love it if you could share what some of your early memories are of being in a garden or out in the bush in green spaces.
Initially, my father was a baker, so moved around a bit, and sometimes we didn't have a garden.
Okay.
When we were at Queenscliff, we didn't have a garden, but used to spend a lot of the time running through the coastal scrub and things like that in that time. Then we moved up to Chook Farm at Glenroy, and also at that stage, my grandmother and grandfather were living with us, and my grandfather was a breeder of gladioli and dahlia. I don't know whether he was very good, but he used to do quite a lot of that sort of thing. So I used to traipse around behind him. And at that time, we had this veggie patch, and my parents said, you can have this little plot. So I did. I grew a whole range of things I can remember, beans, spring onions, carrots, I think I can remember. So there was that opportunity to do that, to do my own thing. And my brother, who's much older than me, he had a patch too. So we were all involved in that sort of thing. I also remember at Glenroy planting an acorn. Mm-hmm. And I thought, these are great big trees, so I better bury it deep. And that acorn never came up because it was probably, I don't know, at least 30, might have been 50 centimetres below the ground.
Oh, wow.
But just because I thought, it's a big tree, it must need to be, go down quite a way so it can grow, but it never did. But so there were good memories just there, running, because we used to grow lucerne on the property, and so we used to make tunnels in the lucerne, which my dad wasn't that keen on. So no, there was a good introduction to, and we had a mulberry tree there, which just used to get covered, and we used to get covered in red too, climbing, collecting the mulberries, and also had silkworms too. And I was trying to work out where I got the silkworms from, but I can't remember that. But I used to have the silkworms, and they used to be in a container under my bed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, used to feed them the mulberry leaves. So,
wow.
That's some of the memories from then. Yeah.
So that's your early life. And then if we jump forward to after school, you went and trained went to university for chemistry?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Went to RMIT, actually after fourth form at high school.
Oh, okay.
They had a diploma.
Okay.
then, which was a 4-year diploma, I think, from memory.
And fourth form is like year 10
Yeah,
equivalent
year 10.
now.
Yeah. So, and that was it was a snap decision in a way, because I did fiddle around with chemicals,
Mm-hmm.
even making things for Guy Fawkes Night and all that sort of thing, which you could go and just buy things from chemical suppliers.
Really?
There was a company called HB Selby in town. You just roll up and say, "Oh yeah, I'd like some of this and some of that, some magnesium," and they would just sell it to you across the counter. And so, and I can always remember there was a huge bang one day when I was producing some hydrogen in our garage, and my mum came out wondering what on earth had happened because she thought the place had blown up. So I was interested in that side of chemistry. And anyway, so I went and started off doing a diploma of chemistry. And so I went to RMIT for a year full time. And then my parents thought it might be a good idea if I found a job somewhere and studied part-time. So I went out, and the first place I went into was William Angliss, which was a huge meat works place in Footscray.
Okay.
The laboratory, they were wanting somebody there, and I got the job there. So I started there pretty well straight after. And it was an amazing place in lots of ways, because the animals would come in and every part of the animal would be used for some, there was one of my first jobs was actually analysing blood and bone.
Really?
So I used to have to go work out how much nitrogen, potassium, and NPK, and phosphorus. And so that was interesting that I was actually analysing the fertilisers. Yeah.
In the early days before you even knew what was coming. Yeah, how interesting. And then there comes a point where you're studying and you put an ad in the local paper for gardening work. Is that right? Could you share that story?
Yeah, that's right. I worked for a couple of, after Angliss, I ended up working for Dunlops at Bayswater, which were industrial, rubber and other things. And so then I decided, I'll go back full-time to doing the diploma. And so pocket money. I used to garden on the weekends. So I put an ad in the local Croydon Mail. And lo and behold, I got quite a few responses. And one was from a woman called Edna Walling, and just said she'd like, have a chat to me. And so I ended up working with her. Probably she was at the end of her career. And so she was finishing off often smaller jobs. And so I would go around with her, and I would often do the work, either planting and things like that, a little bit of landscape construction. And so, and I was trying to remember how long that went for, but it was probably about 6 months, I suppose.
Okay.
Then one day I heard her say to one of the persons I was doing the garden for, "Oh, isn't he an artist? Look at how he works."
Wow.
And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And because at that stage I was also painting. I was doing art. And she said to me, "Look, you're really wasting your time doing chemistry. Would you like to work in landscape and that?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, that sounds interesting." I said, "Look, you probably have to talk to my parents because they're paying for my fees at RMIT." And I didn't know that she'd actually been around to see my parents.
Oh.
And then I found out she had, and she said, "Look, I can get you a job with a company called E.H. Hammond." At that stage, E.H. Hammond were the largest landscape contractors in Australia. They were based at Box Hill. And they used to do very small gardens. They used to do golf courses, athletic tracks. They were responsible for the Olympic Games grounds and things like that in 1956 around Melbourne. And they used to do huge jobs. things like, the then new Royal Children's Hospital.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And so it was a great place to be, just to learn all the nitty-gritty of about soils, about levels, and about plants. And luckily, there's a chap there, the landscape designer called Glen Wilson, and Glen was into Australian plants. And so we formed a pretty strong relationship, which lasted many, many, many years. And so it was great just to have somebody of a similar mind in a way. And at that stage, it was also just propagating plants. And so I was even able to sell some of my plants to E.H. Hammonds for their landscape, because I ended up getting the job of being plant buyer.
Okay.
Over time. And so, that was but it was a really wonderful introduction to the aspect of landscape, gardening, and all the things in between. It was really, really great for 5 years.
Amazing.
Yeah.
When you left chemistry or working in that industry, how did it feel going into landscape? Like, were you happy or was it a relief?
Yeah. Probably just before that time, I'd really got interested in Australian plants through some bushwalking and attending some camps up in the Grampians, and I was trying to work out what all these plants were. And so I think just about everything I was reading was to do with Australian plants and landscape. So, gone were the days of reading novels and stuff. I know I used to read a lot, but it all became plant orientated. And I was gradually building up this nursery. And when I went to Hammonds, I said to them, look, my aim really is to have a nursery.
Okay.
And I said, I thought I'd better tell you that, because, at some stage, if it works out, I might say, look, time that I move on. And there was a small nursery in Croydon called Wildflower Nursery, run by a chap called Jack McLeod. And Jack grunted every time he moved because of arthritis. It was just, and it was just to see somebody like that doing things under such, probably dreadful circumstances in a way. He was just so dedicated, and I thought, that's interesting that he's so involved and he's got this, problem. And he said to me, Roger, just come around any time you like. And so I used to do that, and often work in his glass house and things like that, for no pay. It was just purely an honorary thing. And so I ended up copying his glass house and built it in my parents' backyard, and it kept on propagating, and then it gradually moved into other territories. Then I suppose Gwen and I became quite friendly. And
where did you meet Gwen again?
I was in a church youth club.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was one of those things that gradually developed.
Yep.
And ended up getting married. And luckily, her father was just so kind. He gave us a block of land.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so he had 3 daughters.
Yep.
In Bayswater. And they each got a block of land. So that was pretty fortunate to start off.
Yeah.
And that's where we started a little nursery called Ostraflora Nursery, and gradually developed there. And so, and that was a great partnership that developed with Gwen over time. And,
was Gwen into plants when she first met you, or was it
probably not too much? But her father was a market gardener and things like that. So, she was involved with
surrounded
plants.
by plants,
So, and so we developed, or we built a house there, and
Okay, so the nursery was on the block that you got.
Yeah.
That's
And
cool.
I was able to even use further of Gwen's dad's property for the nursery too. So
That's amazing.
so we were there for a while. Then we ended up moving to Montrose in 1968, where we set up Ostraflora Nursery on a bigger scale.
Now, is Ostraflora, I'm just thinking of the name.
Yep.
Was it just an Australian native plant nursery or lots of
it
different?
was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it was just purely Australian plants.
Yep.
And it started off small and gradually got bigger, and had quite a few staff.
Mm-hmm.
And then after a little while there, I think for about 5 years, we could see an opportunity. We were getting asked to grow a lot. It was a wholesale and retail nursery.
Okay, yeah.
And we were getting asked to grow quite a lot of plants by various nurseries. And so we thought, it's a good idea that maybe we could just set up a propagation nursery and supply other wholesale nurseries. So I then tried to find somebody who'd be willing to take over the retail part of the nursery so we could concentrate on the wholesale side of things. And I asked quite a few friends, because we had quite a few friends who would work on weekends. They'd come part-time, quite knowledgeable people, but none of them really wanted to take it on. But then one of our workers, he said, he'd take it on. So we leased out the retail, and we set up a propagation nursery, which we just used to grow for around about 10 or 12 different growers. South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales, and used to grow just to order, so we didn't have any waste, which was wonderful. You used to grow the quantities they ordered, and so we did that for quite a few years.
Were there any other nurseries around Victoria or Australia growing just Australian natives?
Yeah, we were fortunate. In 1968, there was a nursery in Geelong called Eastern Park Nursery, and they were probably the biggest grower of Australian plants, the Body family, and they shut down in November 1968. And this was just the same time as we were moving from Bayswater to Montrose. And so it was quite a hectic time, because you could go to Body's nurseries and they were selling plants by the carload.
Oh, really?
And so all the mad keen collectors really were down there. And then they had a clearance sale, and we were down a clearance sale buying irrigation equipment. And they specialised in pots, plastic pots. Some people may remember the large Foster's beer can size. Yeah. And that was the size pot they used. So I think we bought just about every plastic pot that they had. And we were using Gwen's dad's truck to transport all this. And lo and behold, one day his truck broke down coming back. So that was a bit of a nuisance. But anyway, we ended up buying hoses and pots and a whole range of stuff from that nursery. So we were able to get in there and fill a bit of a niche that they left. There was Schubert's Nursery in Noble Park, and they're still going. And really, Ben Schubert, the proprietor of that, he was one of the pioneers of things in Victoria. And then New South Wales, there was Barry's Nursery up at Gosford. They were growing just native plants, and also a lot of cut flowers too at the same time. So there were a few, and even in Victoria, there were a lot of small nurseries. Quite a large number of small nurseries just growing Australian plants, yeah.
Where did you get the knowledge on how to propagate to be successful in growing just the right amount? Is there a process, or was that trial and error, or did someone teach you?
Look, it was a lot of trial and error, but I mentioned before Jack McLeod Nursery at Croydon, the Wildflower Nursery. I learned a lot from him, and there was a lot of trial and error, and over time, I suppose, we became renowned as being pretty good propagators.
Mhm.
And this is why we had people ask us, because we were growing a lot of plants which you didn't find readily available,
Okay.
mostly cutting grown.
Mm-hmm.
But so, yeah, there was a lot of trial and error, and, we had failures. Because, you put a whole batch of cuttings in, not get one strike. I think of a Pacris longiflora, which is a fuchsia heath from New South Wales, red and white flowers. For a long time we had trouble with that. But then we gradually worked out that, yes, never used any brown wood on the cuttings. It's got to always be green or just maybe touch of brown. We also used to try different propagation mixes, things like that. And the chap I mentioned before, Glen Wilson, he had a nursery before he got into landscape design. And he always used to use individual 50-millimetre pots for each cutting, direct. So we started doing that. And I know he was often just propagating, in those days, what we called mountain soil, which was beautiful stuff. You could just about eat it. It came from Talangi. It was the top 10 centimetres. They used to scrape the soil. And a lot of nurseries just used to use it for potting mix direct.
Wow.
And we did that too. Then we started to think in our propagating mix, we'll just add some of that soil to a cutting propagation mix, which when you read books, it never said to do anything like that. But one of our reasons for that was that, there's good things in that mountain soil, and there's probably stuff called mycorrhiza, which a lot of Australian plants need. And so we started getting better results, especially with members of the heath family and things like that. So, yeah, we fiddled around, experimenting and taking different cuttings with soft and hard and all things like that. And so gradually worked out. But there wasn't any place at that stage where you could go and learn that as far as a college or anything. That just wasn't available.
With the horticultural industry at that time, where you were doing your own propagation and in the nursery work, were Australian natives were they commonly put into people's home gardens or in public gardens at the time, or was that starting to change when you were doing?
It was just starting to change, I think, and it probably, some of the landscape architects at that stage had started to get interested. One of the great things about my involvement over time was that I met this huge number of people and, a huge number of mentors in a whole range of different ways. But when I worked with E.H. Hammond, there was a landscape architect called Grace Fraser, and she was in partnership with a chap called John Stevens, and they were the really only professional landscape architect firm in those days. But Grace was one who was always interested in the bush and stuff like that. And so she had a keen interest in Australian plants. So even at the Children's Hospital, which is quite different to the Children's Hospital now, but the garden that they did there in the 1950s, early 1960s, that had quite a lot of Australian plants put in it. But they weren't very common, Even in general nurseries, there might be a little native section out the back, and that's changed now. But a lot of the specialist native nurseries too, they've gone. There used to be a lot, and
a lot more back then.
Oh yeah.
I'd
say
think's
probably
happened. What do you think's happened? What's the cause of that?
Some of them were family operated, and they didn't have people to carry on the jobs, and maybe you started to get some of the the larger nurseries, the independent nurseries, and then you had people like Bunnings come in, and they have a much larger range. But a lot of the wholesale nurseries started to grow a wider range of Australian plants. So I can always remember doing a survey. I was involved with a marketing company, a breeding company for a while, and we had a Burnley student go and stand outside Bunnings with a number of different plants, native and non-native, and this was part of her degree course. And when people were told that those plants were Australian plants, oh yes, we'd like that. We'd like to grow that. We didn't realise that was an Australian plant. So, and that would have been in the, I was going to think, 1990s, I suppose, late 1990s. So there was just that interest. And so it's changed. And but there are still some good specialist native nurseries around, but not many.
Not as many. No. Interesting. So with all the experience that you've had with propagating and running nurseries, I understand that you went on and you started writing. So where does writing fit into your journey?
Yeah, well, I used to always be pretty hopeless at English at school, but somehow I started writing. I did an article on correas for a magazine called Australian Plants. It's a Society for Growing Australian Plants magazine. And it was in there, and I had the editor contact me saying, oh, look, your garden magazine would like to reproduce that in their magazine. Is that okay with you? And I said, look, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. So that happened, and at that stage, Your Garden magazine was the prime magazine for gardening in Australia. Yeah. It had been around for a long time. And so then the editor said to me of Your Garden, said, oh, look, would you like to write a monthly article? And I said, okay. And so we talked about what they wanted. And so they were mainly articles just on basic information about Australian plants, trying to provide people with, how big they grow, what they like to grow in, what colour the flowers, what type of flowers and stuff. So it was basic information which wasn't readily available those days. There were a few publications. There was a lady called Thistle Harris from New South Wales who'd done, I think, might have been three different books, and a chap called Alec Blombury from New South Wales. And there were a few other people who'd written books. Sometimes I always wonder whether people read books. Because there's information there, and you hear people saying things and say, oh, that information's out there.
It's in the book. You just have to find it.
Yeah. But so it was very basic information, and there were photographs at that time of printing. Your Garden production of colour plates was horrific.
Oh, really?
It was an old process they used called photogravure. Used to be in Burwood Road, Hawthorne there. And anyway, so that went on for 25 years. I was doing articles, and sometimes it was 2 a month. And in 1974, I'd worked on my first book. It was called, I'm trying to remember the title, but it was to do with Grampians plants.
Okay.
And so they ended up doing a review of it in Your Garden, and the editor made the comment down the bottom, this bloke should write an encyclopedia. And so a company called Lothian Publishing, which are a family, very old Australian family publishing company, Louis Lothian, wonderful man, wrote a letter to me and said, would I be interested in doing an encyclopedia on Australian plants?
What did you think initially?
think Gwen and I might have talked about it for a while. And in the end, I spoke to a good friend, David Jones, who was a neighbour at that stage.
Okay.
And he worked in horticultural research at the Victorian Department of Agriculture at Knoxfield.
Yeah.
And so Dave, he was very knowledgeable on orchids and tropical plants. And so I said to Dave, because Dave and I had spoken roughly that, maybe we could do something together at some stage as far as writing. And I said to Dave, are you interested? And he said, oh, yeah, okay. And so I wrote back to Louis Lothian and said I couldn't do it by myself, but got a friend, David Jones, who's willing to be involved. And so Louis said, well, could you send us some examples of what you do? So Dave and I sat down and we thought, yeah, we'll cover it in 3 volumes. And we went right through and worked out, how many species and all that sort of stuff. And then I said to Dave, we're going to need an illustrator here. And so once again, another good friend, Trevor Blake, who's a really good botanical artist and silversmith and a mad Australian plant grower, and known him for ages. And I said to Blakey, I said, would you be interested in getting involved? And he said, oh, yeah, okay. So anyway, we submitted some what we thought was some interesting information in encyclopedic form. And so Lothian's got a chap, Jim Willis. Now, Jim, he was the government botanist at the Royal Botanic Gardens, and Jim's one of my heroes.
Oh, that's awesome.
And Jim wrote back and said, yeah, that would be good. So then the long journey of about 35 years started. And it went on. And not only 3 volumes, but 9 volumes. And at one stage, after volume 6, we were told by the then publisher, Liz McDonald, who is now a good friend, we've got to cut it. Go back and work out what you can fit in, or how many more volumes you need.
Yeah.
Which for a publisher to do in those days, they were a family publisher. And I know they used to take out a loan each time they printed the volumes, because they'd never done stuff like this, And so we worked out, we said, right, we reckon we can do it in 9. Is that okay, Liz? And she said, right, that's it, no more. So, so anyway, but that whole experience of working on Encyclopaedia is, it's been amazing, really, because it's opened up just so many different areas, and as far as sentimental things, just the friends, the people. Because in the early days, when we had the nursery, we were approached from California to supply some plants.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So at the Los Angeles State and County Arboretum, so one of their people came out, and so we went through the process, and we ended up supplying them with plants. And then we had another group from California called the Saratoga Horticultural Foundation, which were part of the Nurserymen's Association over there. So they said, any chance of supplying some plants? So we supplied plants there. And then they had a few problems with getting them to grow, and University of California, Santa Cruz Arboretum said, we've taken over the plants from the Saratoga. We'd really like to continue a relationship. So that opened up so many different things. And at that stage, we were just starting working on doing research for the Encyclopaedia. So in 1977, I went across and spent 3 weeks over there. I forget exactly, but so to meet up with the University of California people, and then there was just a whole network of other people. And they worked out where I could go and meet people to find out more about Australian plant use in California, because it had been going on there since before the 1900s in California.
Oh, wow.
And there was even a publication in 1907 listing all the Australian plants that were in cultivation there.
Yeah.
So that was interesting, and they teed me up to go and stay with a person called Betty Marshall. And Betty, I found out later, she was more or less the top non-professional gardening person in California. And so they said, she's going to meet me at Los Angeles airport, because they kept telling me, don't drive in Los Angeles. Don't drive. And so she met me there, and here's this tiny little lady with a sign, Rodger Elliot, on. She was only about, so high. And she said, all right, okay, I'll go and find my car. So we had to go and find her car. We hop in this great big Cadillac, and she's virtually looking through the steering wheel as she's driving. So, and then we roll up, and I said, oh, I know that place. And if people remember the Beverly Hillbillies on telly, the start of the Beverly Hillbillies is this mansion.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't go in there, but we went in next door. And so into this wonderful place. And so, she was regarded as a doyen of horticulture. And her role, she said to the professor of botany at University of California, Los Angeles, what can I do to help you? Oh, you could be the botanical boarding house. And she had this fantastic library. And so I spent quite a bit of my time there just researching the stuff. And then one day she said, oh, do you know Curtis's Botanical Magazine? I said, yeah. She said, oh, look, there's probably a lot of information in there. So then she opened the wall, and here's this complete collection of Curtis's Botanical Magazine, which probably, I'm trying to remember when it was first published, whether it was 1830s or something, but she had this whole thing. And so, and Betty and husband George, they're just wonderful. And later on they moved to England. She wanted to buy a National Trust place. Oh. But the place she wanted to buy was ended up being purchased by the Edinburgh Botanic Garden. Okay. So she missed out anyway. So she bought a little place, her and George, just behind Buckingham Palace. And fancy. So we were able to use that as a base whenever we went to London. So,
oh, wow.
But she was amazing. And, no longer with us. But, when we arrived, this was 1983, I think, first time. It was Good Friday. It was freezing. We got to her place, and I think there was a policeman outside her door. And she said, oh, I look after the policeman. I give him a cuppa every now and again. And he was there because he was on guard for Edward Heath, who was then an ex-Prime Minister, I think. Okay. And but anyway, went in, and she said later in the day, would you like to go for a drive? And I said, oh, yeah, okay. And so Betty hops in this fairly big Rover, and off we go, and we're going around, and all of a sudden there's a policeman blowing whistles, because she's going around in the bus zone without a licence. Oh, no. Because they wouldn't give her a licence.
Oh, my goodness.
And anyway, she said, oh, we'll just pretend we're a bus. And off we went. But anyway, but no, she was wonderful.
What a personality.
Yeah. So you got to meet people like that.
Yeah.
So it's and even with the University of California at Santa Cruz, they've got the best collection of Australian plants outside of Australia.
Do they?
What
Like still to this day is?
yeah,
Yeah.
and done on a shoestring.
Okay.
And the director, he was a professor there, but he did it all voluntary work, and they got some funding at one stage from an ex-student who happened to have the name of Packard. And all of a sudden, the board of the garden said, "Have we got an arboretum?" The board of the university, rather. Have we got a botanic garden? They didn't, because they wanted some of Julie Packard's money. She's Hewlett Packard. I
was going to say that name. Yep.
Yeah, and when she graduated in marine science, her dad said, "What would you like for a graduation present?" So that was Monterey Aquarium, which was probably one of the leading aquariums in the world. Which is and there's a whole range of these stories which float around, and other people in botanic gardens we've been involved with too. It's been great.
Yeah. There must be. You could write 9 volumes on the stories of people that you've met, couldn't you?
Well, that's right. It's because we've formed pretty strong friendships with the people, especially California, and some of the other places, New York. Yeah.
I have a copy of the encyclopedias, and because they're not publishing them now, are they?
No,
but you can get secondhand ones. So I found, all 9 volumes, and I've actually used them once or twice, other than reading them, but I've used them to reference plants that I was looking up. So I went to Kuranga recently, which is a dedicated Australian native nursery in Mount Evelyn, Victoria, and I bought 2 Tomasia. How do I say it?
Tomasia. It doesn't matter how you pronounce it.
Because I'm terrible with pronunciation.
No, nobody really knows how Romans spoke Latin.
True.
So and people get their knickers in a knot about the way of pronunciations. And a wonderful man, William Stern, he was regarded as the top botanical Latin scholar.
Oh.
And he says it doesn't matter.
Okay.
So
that will be my motto going forward. My Tomasias. And in typical me fashion, I lost one of the labels. And so I planted it, but then I'm like, oh, I better have a look to find out what it is. I'm like, I know. I have these encyclopedias. So it was great. I knew it was a Tomasia, and I had a look. And what I love about the encyclopedias is just the way the information is accessible to non-trained botanic people like myself. And there's the illustrations that helped me, but just the descriptions are so great, Roger. It helped me whittle down which one it was. And then I emailed you and I'm like, I think it's this one, because I wasn't prepared to say it is this one. But I just love that you made the information so accessible and really easy to be able to use. It's just awesome.
No, it's nice to know. And we have got lots of compliments about it. There's one problem sometimes which we couldn't really do because it would have been so complicated. There isn't what you actually call a key to try and take you down to things. So sometimes you've got to start off with maybe thinking, oh, yes, it is a Tomasia, or it isn't. But well, we did receive a really wonderful acclamation, and really, in a way, it was from a person working at Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, and she, in a review she said, this is what gardening encyclopedias should be like. So we thought that was wonderful.
That's great. That's the highest praise you can get, isn't it?
But there are some errors you'll pick up. It's interesting. Not so much errors, but there's things now which we probably would have done slightly differently. But I suppose that's just, time goes by.
And when you've never done it before, you don't know,
so
do
that's
you?
Right. We were covering things in there which we didn't know really well too. So, it's just the Australian flora is so wide and varied and wonderful. Dave Jones concentrated on Northern Australia. I concentrated on Southern. And, so things come to light. And I know people said, oh, you haven't included this, why didn't you include this? And so there's things like that have come up because, as you mentioned before, it's, suitable for cultivation. And we were going on often experiences of people. And if we hadn't have been able to gain a lot of this knowledge from other people, the Encyclopaedia wouldn't have been what it's like, because they were just so helpful.
Yeah, so you collected, really curated the information based on everyone's experience.
There was in the botanical world, as far as the botanists and that was fantastic. We only had one person, one woman, who I won't name, who never was helpful at all, and everybody else, was just so helpful. And that with that help, that really helped make it a much better publication.
Yeah.
And it's been a wonderful journey.
Yeah. Thinking of botanical gardens or Royal Botanic Gardens, I understand you've been on the board of the Royal Botanic Gardens Melbourne, but also very instrumental in the development of the Cranbourne Gardens. Are you able to share a bit about your involvement in the beginning of Cranbourne, and then maybe also a little bit about the Chelsea experience that you had with the Australian Garden?
Yep. Yeah. I just happened to be appointed to the Royal Botanic Gardens Board of Victoria just at the right time in lots of ways. It's very rare that you get a chance to be involved in a new botanic garden. And the then director of the RBGV, as it's become known, was Phil Moores. And so it was his project that he was able to get involved with. There had been talk of, way back as early as 1940s, in the 1940s, of having a botanic gardens in Victoria just for Australian plants. And that was instigated by a woman called Maud Gibson. And Maud set up a trust, not a huge trust as far as value, but it's been very influential. And the money raised from that trust only went to projects for the Royal Botanic Gardens Victoria. Wow. Now, there may be some old people listening. There was a store called Foy and Gibson store on the corner of Swanson Street and Burke Street in Melbourne, on the northeast corner. And Maud was the daughter of the Gibson of the Foy. And she was a very enlightened lady, and she's done some marvellous things over time. But anyway, so there was a trust set up, and the people on that trust had to be a botanist from Melbourne University, and then some other people, 5 people. And so they looked at a whole lot of places, and they ended up selecting Cranbourne as being the site. So for a while there, it was, a bit neglected, the Cranbourne site. They planted a few things just to see what would grow and things, but there really wasn't much effort put into developing it. And then the opportunity came to set up an Australian garden. And that was in the early 1990s. And actually probably before I got onto the board, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it was. I was asked to go on a committee to look at the development and how it could be developed. And so after people called Taylor, Cullity, Lethleen and Paul Thompson were appointed, selected to do the design, once again there was a committee, and so I was involved on that, and so was involved in helping write the brief. Oh, this was just before that, actually, to write the brief for the design. Mm-hmm. And it was called The Spirit of Australia, which was a pretty wide brief. And, so that was a fantastic time to be involved just in the development. Yeah. And the fact that Taylor, Cullity, Lethleen and Paul Thompson were chosen, that was certainly the best choice. I wasn't involved in choosing. That was done by the board. But, that was by far the best choice of what was on offer. And so now it's become world-renowned.
It has, isn't it? Yeah. And so where did the Chelsea Garden fit in? Was that part of Cranbourne or was that a different project?
Oh, yeah, it came out of 3 people suggesting, the RBGV should have a garden at Chelsea. And so it was they put up the money because it's quite an expensive thing. And so there was Jim Fogarty was chosen to do the design, and he based the Chelsea garden on the Cranbourne garden. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of work done, trying to where we're going to get the plants and all that sort of stuff.
And how did you get the plants over there? Was that a whole process in itself?
Yeah, all the plants came from Europe.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So Jim Fogarty had been involved in Chelsea Gardens before, and so he had these contacts as far as people who could put him in the right direction.
Yeah.
And at that stage, I was also involved with a company called Outback Plants, and we were marketing plants overseas.
Yeah, okay.
And so we had contacts there as far as me being able to get plants and things. So, they went around, I think nearly a year before, and selected plants at some of the nurseries.
Right.
But then they had a big disaster. They went back to see how the plants were at one place, and they had all been sold.
Oh, no.
So they had to, that was mainly some of the advanced plants. So, but no, and there was a landscaping company here, the Semkins, who had been involved in other gardens over at Chelsea. So some of the Semkins were there involved, and we used a highly renowned landscape company to do the works over there. So it was pretty exciting times. It was full on.
Yeah, it would have been.
For 14 days or whatever.
Yeah.
And so Gwen and I were there helping. And I was helping Jim with his plant selection.
Right.
And where to actually place them. Because the idea was that it had to go from more or less coastal through to tropical. And so, that was good.
What was the public response to seeing Australian plants?
That was quite amazing.
Yeah.
I know there was a whole lot of us handing out brochures and things like that, and there was usually 2, 3, 4 people deep.
Wow.
Out of because there was a competition on too.
Yeah.
So a lady ended up winning, and she came out in the end. I think she came out. Part of the thing was a flight out here and back. So there was a lot of interest in it, and the fact that it got a gold medal was
amazing.
Yeah, so that was it was good,
Yeah.
and a lot of publicity. Yeah, yeah.
So with the garden at Cranbourne, I understand you and Gwen have done a lot of volunteering as well out there with the Friends of Cranbourne. What's the official title of that group called again?
It's had
I always
some
get
it's had some name changes, I think.
Okay.
I think it's the Cranbourne Friends of the Royal Botanic Gardens,
Okay.
Victoria, Cranbourne. Or, I don't know whether the Cranbourne gets tacked on the end.
Yeah, that's what I get confused by.
There were some name changes occurring when they tried to put a big umbrella over the Melbourne Gardens and the Cranbourne Gardens, because it's all under the same auspices.
Yeah.
So we're involved in that. I think probably volunteering has been a pretty important part of our life.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, what keeps drawing you back to volunteering? Because you still volunteer. Well, you did the other month when I went for a tour with 3CR. So what is it about volunteering that draws you back?
Oh, look, I think I look back to even when I first started out in the Australian plant world, there were so many people that were willing to help. And so it's just giving back, you know. It's when the Cranbourne Garden, the Australian garden, was going to be developed, a lot of people in the Australian Plant Society related things. They'd always been, not always, but they'd been quite critical of the Royal Botanic Gardens in a way for what they've done for Australian plants in the Melbourne Garden. Mm-hmm. And so I suppose I was one of the prime movers in a way. So now's the opportunity. If you want something like this, really get behind it. This will be your only opportunity to make sure that, and that happened. And so the Friends really developed, into quite a sizable group and very active group of people. And and you make some great friends in volunteering. And it's a two-way thing, quite important to Gwen and I.
Yeah, so wonderful. And I understand that part of your role at the Friends of Cranbourne has been one of like being a mentor to people, but also you've done a lot of mentoring outside of just that group. And when I was doing some research for this podcast, I had a chat to a few people who work in the industry. So John Arnott is one of them. He was at Cranbourne. What was his role out there?
He
again?
was
I can't remember.
manager of horticulture.
There you go. And Chloe Foster, who was out there for a little bit.
Yep.
And they talk about, and I know they said you're very self-effacing, so you won't want to talk about this, but your work in encouraging them in their own careers has just been phenomenally impactful. And Chloe's book, she said, wouldn't be published today if it wasn't for you and Gwen. And John also says that he probably wouldn't have gone the way he had without your impact. Has being a mentor for other people in the industry been a really conscious decision you've made along the way, or is it just part of who you are?
Oh, no, look, I think it's a pretty conscious decision, mainly because I had so many mentors myself. You know, I mentioned the chap Glen Wilson before, and Glen, he was the only student that Edna Walling ever had. And Glen, it was just so wonderful to go and work for Hammonds and have somebody there that you could talk to and who would get excited about Australian plants. I know on one time we were travelling and Gwen was in the car with Glen and we're heading down to see one of his gardens he designed down at the Mornington Peninsula. And all of a sudden there's, "Comes your backstory!" yells out Glen, and Gwen wondered what on earth she was getting herself into. And so he slams on his brakes, and so there was a Kunzia backstory, which is a red bottle brush type plant in full bloom, which you never used to see very much about. So Glen was so enthusiastic, and so he was a great mentor, and other people, have helped. And therefore, I think in a way, it's a bit of an obligation because, people help you, and if you can help them. And once again, it's a two-way relation. I was saying this to Chloe the other day. It's a two-way thing because, talking to her dad about it at the book launch, and because it works both ways, and it's hopefully pleasing and beneficial to both people. So it's a thing of just being able to help and where you can, and often when you've had a bit of experience for Chloe, for instance, for dealing with publishers and things like that, if you can help, all the better.
So good. Yeah, there's so many people that just rave about your impact. So I won't go on much more about that because we could talk for hours about it. But yeah, it's just, I think the common thread that people say is just the way you show up for them. So it's just this gentle, supporting, coming alongside of, and just, it's just the way that you are, which just helps them. Like you said, like when you get someone who gets it and they get excited about the things you're excited, it almost creates momentum, doesn't it? And then helps keep you going.
I think that's right. And it's because they give back. You think, oh, yeah. So then the relationship keeps going. Whereas if you find there's silence, you think, oh, well, look, maybe that's not the way to go. But
so like a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah.
Oh, so wonderful. Now, this wouldn't be the Sentimental Gardener podcast without talking about some sentimental plants for you. Do you have a sentimental plant that you would love to talk about today?
Yeah, look, it's a dreadful looking plant because it's been in this pot and it was going to be planted a long time ago, but we've had a few changes in our garden and it hasn't got into the ground as yet. But it's got this funny name, Alyogyne, Alyogyne. And on the label, they haven't put the species name, which is a bit naughty, Alyogyne huglii, but it's sometimes called the blue hibiscus. It's nowhere near blue. It's purple. But it grows from South Australia right around through Western, mainly coastal, inland a little bit. Gets up to, I think, probably maybe Carnarvon, up to fair way up anyway. But it's a plant that there's been quite a few different selections of this in the trade over the years. We used to grow one called Mura, which had a huge flower, but it used to get covered in aphids.
Oh.
But then this plant is it's a cultivar called West Coast Gem. Flowers all the year. People are very loath to prune it back when you should cut it back while it's young and because it always got flowers on it. But this actual plant it's a seedling of some hybridising work done by Professor Ray Collette at UC Santa Cruz. We supplied plants to them, and then he thought he'd probably try a bit of hybridising. And so he developed quite a range of different selections, and some of them are in the Californian nursery trade. But anyway, this is a seedling, and we called it West Coast Gem because of the link between west coast of California, western coast of Western Australia. And it was we introduced it into the nursery trade back in the 1980s, I think.
Wow.
It was before plant breeders' rights came in and all that sort of thing.
Okay.
But it's just that link between, the friendships of California
Yeah.
and here. So it's we usually have a plant in our garden all the time. We've had a couple in there and they've gone to God. But so we've got another one ready to go. So it's Elliot, Hughlii, West Coast Gem.
Perfect. I love that story. Oh, it's so gorgeous. I think I was telling you before, I think there's one down the road from me. So I'm going to go and have a look this afternoon when the rain stops.
Yeah.
Now I know the story of it. And every time I walk past with the dogs, I'll be telling my kids, do you know the story of this? And I'm like, okay, Mum.
One thing I didn't mention, it doesn't get affected by aphids.
This one. Okay.
It doesn't have aphid attack.
Oh,
whereas
so good.
some of the others do. So anyway, that's a little, sentimental.
So sometimes we talk about 3 sentimental plants,
Yep.
but do you have another 2 that they could have some type of memory or meaning behind them for you?
I mentioned the mulberry earlier on, and that does, I can just always remember getting covered in stains and my mother would be beside us. But the other thing was correas. I mentioned before I did this first article on correas. And that correas, there's one correa, a species in Victoria and goes into New South Wales and to South Australia called Correa reflexa, common correa. And you could do just a trip trying to find out all the different variations in Correa reflexa. And people have done this. There used to be I think it's still going, a Correa study group. And they have this fantastic collections of different Correa reflexes. And one time Gwen and I were down in the Brisbane Ranges, west of Melbourne, and I was collecting stuff down there. And we had this whole range of different flower shapes, different flower colours, different leaves. And I forget, there might have been 12 or so. And so I sent them into the herbarium at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Melbourne, saying, look, are these all the same species? And Jim Willis, who I mentioned before, is one of my heroes. Jim wrote back in his copper plate writing,
wow,
Roger, I'm just so sad to tell you that they are all the same species.
No.
And so Jim was a botanist who could talk to anybody at their level.
Oh, that's really a gift, isn't it?
Yeah. And so there's a bloke who's just retired from about Neville Walsh. I don't know whether you come across Neville, but Neville is another Jim Willis, They're just fantastic. They can talk to you at your level. You don't have to go up and say, what are you talking about? So just always remember Jim writing, saying, I'm so sorry.
We're talking about collecting seeds and plants and all that type of stuff. You're still doing that, aren't you? You just went on a recent trip to the Grampians?
Oh, yeah, I was mainly photographing.
Okay.
And I mentioned before a book on the Grampians I wrote in 1974. I revised it in 1984, and then it went out of print about 3 years later, I think. And people keep saying, when are you going to revise it? And after the Encyclopaedia, I was a bit booked out, It's just, And so I didn't do anything about it. And then, I forget now, might have been about a year ago, people said, look, why don't you redo it? And so I decided, I'll have a go. And then after working on it for a while, I thought, oh no, it needs to be totally rewritten, really. Okay. So I'm in the process of doing that, and I just needed to get some photographs.
Okay.
And also reunite, I suppose, with the flora of the Grampians.
Mm.
And I was especially looking for small things, which previously my first book I really hadn't worried too much about, some little tiny things, which
Okay.
are often very important. And thought, well, I should include those. So, so I was mainly photographing that sort of stuff. And I thought I'd have a week photographing. One day was during that big stormy day, so I didn't.
What was it?
They told everybody to stay indoors. So, I didn't get everything done, but was able to get a lot done. So, sorting photographs, throwing out the ones that are no good, and hopefully getting some good ones.
That's so awesome that you're still doing it actively out in the field, and that the love to write books has come back after all that time. I want to touch on, before we wrap up soon, that your work with plants has been a partnership of type with your wife, Gwen, and that, like you said, you've written books, but Gwen's also written books as well. What has it meant to you to have someone who gets it, I suppose, and have that passion and share the life with you?
Fine. When I started off, writing, I couldn't type.
Oh, really?
But Gwen's an excellent typist.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to remember the Encyclopaedia, probably right up, maybe all volumes, Gwen typed.
Wow.
I would write longhand. And back in the days before computers, when we did volume 1 and maybe volume 2, if there were any corrections, you had to retype the whole page again, because you couldn't just go back to the computer.
And you can't hit backspace.
No. So on some occasions, because what would happen with Dave Jones, we would look at each other's copy, make our comments, often very rude, some of the time. And so if we had to correct, it needed retyping. So, and Gwen was a good editor too. So a lot of editing was done, and so typing. So yeah, that was a real partnership, and the Encyclopaedia wouldn't be there probably if we hadn't have been doing that together. And the same with David too. Initially, his wife Barbara, she did all his typing too. So so we're heavily reliant on having them there. And one stage when I was writing, there was a bloke who used to be involved with the Gould League. He suggested to another publisher that it'd be good to get me to do something for them. And so Anne Godden from Highland House contacted me, and I said, look, I won't be able to do that. I'm just flat out with the Encyclopaedia and stuff, but maybe Gwen could. So that started up with Gwen writing for Highland House, and she ended up doing about 10 books with Highland House. And as soon as she'd finish one, Anne would say, well, what are you doing next, Gwen? And so they covered a whole range of subjects, one for kids, which was, I think, shortlisted for a children's book. But there was also art and craft, book on art and craft for Gwen. So, yeah, that worked out very well.
So good. I've noticed you've got another book there. Did you want to chat about something with that?
That was a pruning book. And when I was going to mention the Elliot we talked about before, that was used on the cover of the pruning book.
Yeah.
But it's interesting just with books. Pruning book, a little book like that, sold many, 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 many more copies than an encyclopedia.
Isn't it interesting?
I think it was reprinted about 9 times. So, just often basic information is very good, practical information. So and we did a series of tiny little booklets too, Trevor Blake and I, just on different areas, Wilson's Prom, Gramps, Otways, New South Wales, a couple of the national parks in New South Wales, just little tiny books just to get people interested.
Yeah.
So they grab onto it and say, oh, yeah. Whereas you don't have to always write highfalutin books. You know.
It's interesting with plant information and thinking about what change you've seen with like from technology just to how we've got so much information on the internet now that we can access immediately. But there's still this draw to books, isn't there? Because I don't know, I'm just thinking aloud because
Yeah.
you know, I suppose you have a reputation and you've gone to the scientists and you've got a broad range of experience to draw from the encyclopedias and books. But sometimes reading something on the internet, you might not know what background someone's coming from.
No, that's right. And I think, you need to be wary, I think, of getting information. Even I'm on Facebook, but I don't really use it.
Sure.
I don't put stuff on it myself, hardly ever. But just looking at a thing the other day there, people were trying to identify this plant.
Uh-huh.
And they were way off, you know.
Yeah.
And people would believe that maybe. And so, whereas if you can, you know, find publications or even information on the internet that you know comes from reputable sources, you know, there's a thing called Vic Flora.
Okay.
On which is run by the Botanic Gardens of Melbourne. It just covers Victorian plants.
Yep.
But that's a wonderful resource as far as getting good information. And there's other, you know, plenty of others, but sometimes you just need to be a bit wary of where that information's coming from. Yeah. Yeah,
a bit of discernment. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to cover before we jump into the quick fire questions?
I had a little list here.
Yeah, have a look through and see if there's anything.
There was just one story. Perhaps.
Go for it, yeah.
We had this wonderful friend called Albie Lindner, and he lived at Vectis, which is just near Horsham. And Albie and his brother were pioneers, in a way, of cultivating Australian plants. And when they were kids, they used to go into the Grampians and take cuttings and stuff, which you don't do now. And they would give their own names to the plants because they didn't know what they were.
Okay.
And Albie was one of these blokes. He would just go all day on a lemonade bottle full of cold tea. He'd take that, he'd just go out. But the other thing with Albie, at one stage we were up in North Queensland and we collected some seed of a purple wattle, Acacia purpurea petala. And I think we might have given Albie 4 seeds. I forget one. Anyway, 2 he treated with hot water and the other 2 he stuck in his mouth and just chewed. I don't think there was any cyanide in wattles.
Right,
There's often cyanide in wattle seeds, but it didn't seem to worry Albie. But he stuck that, and he might have been a couple of days that he just round and around his mouth, and then he sowed them, and they germinated. And so he was softening the seed coating.
Yeah.
You know, so, but he was a farmer.
Okay.
And just some of the stories Albie used to tell were fantastic.
I mean, we need those type of people, don't we, to go, hey, do you know what worked?
Yeah,
Just, Not for everyone to do, but, my goodness, the people you've met. Well, I'm going to jump into our quick fire questions now to finish off. And the first one has been sent in by Chloe Foster, someone you know well and have met. She'd like to know who's your favourite horticulturist. So it's a little bit of a trick question because I think she wants you to say her.
No, I'm not going to say Chloe.
No.
But my favourite horticulturist, my goodness.
Or who I think we've got, because that one will put you into the spot because there's so many people that you love. Yeah. But is there someone who you just like,
One of the person, it was a woman called Cass Dowding, who was a real rough diamond. She was a dedicated sort of person. She was responsible for developing Carwarra Garden as it is now, the part up there, and she did it all voluntarily. She was, she call a spade, and she'd tell you right to your face. But as a gardener, she was pretty good. So yeah, can remember, had some quite heated discussions with Cass, but as a person, she did quite a lot. And she'd turn a lot of people off, but yeah.
Sounds like a character.
Yeah, she was.
All right, what's the best advice someone has ever given you in life or work?
Probably just to be yourself. Would be it's just to do things. And I suppose there's always been an emphasis on caring, for people, I think.
If you could swap lives with a plant for a year, which one would it be and why?
Swap life with a plant?
Yep, so you get to be a plant for a year. Which one are you going to be and why?
I don't know. I wouldn't mind being a Dorianthus, but, they don't flower very often. But when they do, they put on a show. But even sometimes just some of the small plants, Hibbertias. There's one we've got growing in our garden called Hibbertia glossularia folia, which is a ground cover. And the glossularia bit means it's because it's a bit like a strawberry, the foliage. And that's just been fantastic this year. But I don't know.
There's some good answers. It's a hard one, I know. Just a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
Okay, with all your years of bushwalking, is there a particular place or spot where you have just felt reverence or overwhelming awe or wonder?
Yeah, look, just being back at the Grampians, that's the spot that really got me turned on with plants, I suppose. And it's over the years, I know when we've been travelling to other parts of Australia, and when you come back to the Grampians, you think, this is as good as anywhere. And just last week when I was up there, I felt I looked at some of those, really rugged mountains, and it just pops up out of the middle of nowhere, virtually. And so, yeah, look, parts of the Grampians, I think, are pretty special. Because last week there were literally, I reckon, millions of the grass trees in flower that were after the fires of the year before last. As you went south of Hall's Gap towards Dunkeld, you'd come across a patch, and then I took photographs, and then it started to rain, and there was more, and I thought, I really should stop and take photographs. But I'd never seen as many grass trees in flower. So, and they're probably going to be like that for about another 2 weeks, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just, eye-boggling and mind-boggling, with the backdrop of the mountains of the Grampians.
Stunning. Okay, one word or sentence to describe how you feel when you're in your home garden.
Would you believe I'm a bit limited in doing gardening things these days because of silly physicalities.
Yeah.
But probably one of the things I do enjoy is pruning in gardens. I'm not a plant shaper as such. I suppose this is one thing that Glen Wilson taught me way back in the 1960s. When you prune, try and make it that you can't see where you've pruned.
Okay.
And so tend to be, and another person who also was a great person as far as pruning is an American, and he called himself a tree shaper.
Mm-hmm.
He was an arborist, but
Yeah.
he was a tree shaper. So that is probably the thing that, one of the things I enjoy in the garden, doing that sort of thing, just touching things up, and yeah.
Awesome. Last question. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. One person from either history or still living who you'd love to sit down with and listen to them talk about their plant stories.
Probably Neville Walsh, ex-botanist maybe.
Okay.
Neville was, he's just wonderful. Often I was send an email to Neville saying, "Looks, what do you reckon?" And he'll send back an answer in a way which you feel he's not sure about it, but he really is. He puts it in terms that makes you feel as though he's not talking down to you. And so, yeah, probably Neville Walsh, I would say. So ex-botanist at the Botanic Gardens.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's probably a hard question for you because you have had so many opportunities to talk to so many incredible people and listen to their plant stories. So, did well.
Yeah, because even David Jones, the chap who wrote the Encyclopaedia, it's his travels because he's named so many new plants, new plants to us, not so much to First Nations people, but new to, settlers here. So, there's a lot of people actually. I was trying to think. Even Ray Collette used to be over at UC Santa Cruz. Ray had the best nose ever.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He would come out here and we'd go bush with the manager, the Arboretum, Brett Hall. And I always remember one day in Western Australia, we were looking at some plants called Beaufortias. They're related to bottle brushes and that in the myrtle family. They're usually orange flowered, not always. And he said, "Roger, this is a different species over here. It's got a different perfume." And they looked quite similar, and he was probably right. There might have been some differences, but that's the same with David Jones with orchids. He would spend hours lying on his stomach watching to see what insects would come and visit, and even if the different perfumes of the orchids. And because a lot of orchids just have one pollinator, one species. And so people like that have got some wonderful stories to tell, and because we don't know enough about that insect relationship plant. And that's one of the things I suppose I should have mentioned before. To me, there's a word called ecology.
So glad you brought this up, yeah.
And it's probably one of the most important words in the dictionary because it's interrelationship between all living creatures, living and dead for that matter. So and that's probably what we've tried to do with our gardens, They're ecological habitat gardens as much as showing off plants. Yeah.
Is that something that you lead with when you talk about plants with people?
I think there is that aspect of spoken to groups quite a bit about that sort of starting off with ecology being the most important word in the dictionary. Yeah.
So good. All right. Well, Roger and Gwen, who's here today, thank you so much for sharing your stories and for doing the work that you've done for all the years that you have. It's just been an honour to capture this moment and to explore who you are behind the encyclopedias and books. So I just want to say a huge thank you for being my guest today on the Sentimental Gardener podcast. Thanks very much, Cass. It's been interesting and pleasurable. It did end up being interesting, didn't it? Well, I hope so. Yeah. After my day recording with Roger, I sat with his and Gwen's stories for a little while. Then it struck me how deeply their lives embody what they've spent decades tending. Not just in gardens, but in the way they've cared for nature, for each other, and for the people they've supported along the way. Before ecology was something you could Google, Roger talked about noticing how birds, bugs, sunlight, and soil all shaped one another. He and his mentors simply called it the web of life, a way of seeing that says nothing grows alone. And when I think of the encyclopedias and the nursery work and the field work, I can see Gwen's presence in all of it too. Steady, thoughtful, and interwoven with Roger's. Their work isn't just a partnership, it's an ecosystem. A living example of something Roger often said: growth happens through relationship. Through the gentle things like curiosity, kindness, and the art of paying attention. So maybe this story leaves you with something too. Maybe it reminds you of your own ecosystem, the people you lean into, the ones who've helped you grow even if they didn't know it. And maybe, just maybe, it leaves you wondering who might be leaning into you. My hope for you is this: that you find your people. May you walk beside them the way Roger and Gwen have walked beside each other. And may you keep tending your part of the web, trusting that your care is already nourishing something bigger than you can see. If you enjoyed this conversation today, check out the other episodes, or share it with a friend, or even leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. This episode is brought to you by paid Substack subscribers to the Sentimental Gardener. A huge thank you to Hayden Schuller from Varaya Gardening for our theme music, and to my wonderful husband Tom Dowding for audio support. This is the Sentimental Gardener with me, Cass Dowding. This episode was recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung and Bunurong Boonwurrung peoples. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I honour their ongoing care of this country.